After school ends, at the end of June, our kids immediately get excited for what we call the Rainbow Parade. You see, for every year of their lives, June has meant dressing up in all the colors of the rainbow and celebrating their gay families. My son and stepson, Max and Bennett, like to ride in the back of the truck and hand out all the swag, or maybe eat all the donuts. My stepdaughter Priscilla pulls up her rainbow socks and straps on her roller skates to lead the Jewish delegation. For the last 25 plus years, I've never missed a Pride parade. We knew a while ago that Pride was canceled, but it feels more real now when we'd all love to be together, celebrating, singing, and dancing. I was looking forward to being with all of you in our CBI Pride shirts, holding hands with my new wife and walking through downtown. I don't need to say it, this year is different. This year, the Pride parade and celebrations have been canceled. This year, stores that celebrate Pride and hang rainbow flags on their windows are closed and boarded up, having been replaced with protest signs. The streets in front of those stores where we spent hours lining up for the Pride parade, the sidewalks where we wait to cheer everyone on as they go by, are now lined with police. The same streets that had been filled with song and dance are now filled with pain 400 years in the making. The systemic racism and violence that permeates the history of this country and affects the everyday lives of Black people has yet again given us no choice but to understand how it continues to distort society and shape our lives. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught, some are guilty, but all are responsible. We traditionally celebrate Pride during the month of June in commemoration of the Stonewall Uprising in June of 1969, a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations by the queer community against police raids of the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York City. The 1960s and the decades before were not a welcoming time to be gay in this country. It was actually illegal to be gay, and people were harassed, beaten, arrested, and murdered on a regular basis. The very act of gay people getting together was illegal and grounds to lose your job. If a teacher went to the bar and her name ended up in the newspaper, she would be fired from her position. These acts of resistance at Stonewall are some of the most important events leading to the modern fight for queer rights in this country. This year, it's more important than ever to remember the real origin of Pride, not a dance party in the street, but rather a demonstration of collective pain and anger when a few brave individuals, primarily drag queens, trans people, and cisgender women of color, put their bodies and their voices on the line. A few brave souls who said enough is enough. On that warm summer evening in 1969, they came to Greenwich Village to find community and the opportunity to be their true self. But when the police arrived at the Stonewall Inn, when fear and hopelessness gripped the streets, they refused to turn away from the rage of an entire community. These were not the school teachers, the bankers, the bachelor uncle, the aunt whose fiance died in the war. These were gender outlaws and people of color who could not hide their identities. As a white member of the LGBTQ plus community, I'm obligated to remember that if not for the bravery of our Black, female, trans, and genderqueer ancestors who risked their lives for our collective liberation, because as we've seen, when people of color stand up to the police, when they protest, when they march, their lives are on the line. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be able to enjoy the simple freedom of taking my children to the Rainbow Parade. I wouldn't be standing here as your rabbi giving this drosh. Like the other white members of our Jewish community, I benefit from the privilege of whiteness. So how do I begin taking apart my own privilege, much less participate in the dismantling of systemic racism? Our foundational stories as Jews is that we were slaves in Egypt, that we've been persecuted and marginalized throughout history. The last 2 weeks, I've heard it said or insinuated that because of this history of oppression that we understand. We do not understand. I have not faced deadly homophobia or crushing anti-Semitism. I'm not afraid to call the police. Yes, my history informs who I am today, but I will not try to compare or assume I understand someone else's. In this week's Torah portion, B'chalotacha, we learn that the Israelites marched from the mountain of God with the Ark of the Covenant in front of them, and Moses would say, "Advance, O God, may your enemies be scattered, may your foes flee before you." This is part of my history as a Jew, and one reenact each Shabbat with our Torah scroll. Yet we know our foes have not scattered. Sefer HaAgadah, the book of legends, offers a midrash, a story about what this journey of the Israelites must have looked like. It teaches that a sign would appear in the cloud for Moses when it was about to move. When he saw this sign, he would say, Kuma Adonai, v'yafutzu oivecha, rise up, O God, and let my enemies be scattered. Then the cloud moved, and Judah set out, and all the other tribes followed. Every person with their own custom and banner would follow, marching together. This story teaches that each tribe within the larger congregation of Israel moved in its own unique way, but all together. I find this image powerful, and yet know that this has not always been true. We march every year in the Pride Parade, and today we march in the streets for the pain of centuries of systemic racism because our enemies have not been scattered, our foes have not fled. For Jews, and especially those of us who are part of the queer community, this is our inheritance, a history of grief and anger that reignites when we encounter the pain of those on the margins. For the pain demands that we listen. It gives us the ability to connect and the courage to act. It reminds us that we are all responsible. Year after year, we marched a great distance through the wilderness. We waved our banner, and yet we are still not at the promised land. We will continue to march, literally or figuratively. We will continue to fight. Yes, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marched with Dr. King in Selma, but that's not the end. We are not done. As Eric Ward recently taught during a conversation on racial justice in America, this is not a sprint or a marathon. This is a relay race. No matter what path we take, each of us is given the opportunity to pick up the Torah and continue the journey of the Israelites, because we are all responsible. Kei Nihi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Shabbat Shalom.